Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maria, for very passionate presentation and for very good translation. Maria lived in Russia for some time, 20 years ago. That's why she very effectively found this word from Kimmelman. Ekaterina Golovatyuk, now I want to introduce her. She represents OMA, Architectural Bureau of Rem Kolkhoz, and Katya became the member of Garage because she's a chief architect of the project of the Four Seasons building, and she has been working with it for over 3 years. Together with OMA Bureau, Ekaterina has been working for 6 years already, and the presentation is called Responsive Space for Public, the Ideas of Art. And she will be talking about the unique project for Hermitage, as Kate said. That's the first public art museum on the territory of Russia. And this project was never implemented, but the value of this project is that still is actively used by the museum in its own regular work. And also, Ekaterina will finalize her presentation speaking about our building. And Katya is a unique person. She lived in Russia, in US, and in Italy, and she has very international position point of view. Thank you very much. The floor is yours. Ну что ж,
I will speak in English because it's international conference, but also because English is shorter and I can fit more information. I would like to present two museum projects by OMA that I think are particularly relevant for this conference. First of all, because they're projects in Russia, and secondly, because these projects address preservation and the exhibition of art. The first one, as Nastya mentioned, is the Hermitage Project, which is actually, I will describe the first part of a very long effort, of a very long collaboration between OMA and the Hermitage Museum. And the second project is the garage, which is here at the Gorky Park, and it's currently under construction. I would like to start with a slightly bigger picture. This is a graph showing basically the behavior of the Wall Street market in red, and its kind of exponential growth between 1990 and 2005, and the related kind of collective effort of global museums to follow this rise and to expand their territories and their scale to kind of an unimaginable size. Here you can see the escalation of scales of different museums, so bigger and bigger and bigger. And of course, the bigger the museums got, they felt that they also had to accommodate bigger and bigger crowds. This is kind of the resulting effect in Louvre, which is quite interesting because it completely kind of shifts kind of the point of museum to a certain extent and shifts kind of the experience of the museum. Also, this image is quite indicative. You can see kind of crowdedness in the back, in the painting, kind of seamlessly merging with the crowdedness of the public in the foreground. So the big question that kind of could be asked whether art and kind of museums are still about contemplation of art, or it is now about gathering very large crowds. Another example that is also very well known of escalation and kind of extravagance of art and of architecture altogether, as well as here kind of in Tate. So compared to all of these Western examples, Hermitage, when we were asked to look at it, actually presented a kind of utopia of a territory that was completely not interested in growth. This graph shows again the kind of the stock market, but it also shows a completely flat white line, which shows that Hermitage, through its history, has never expanded. The only big exception came in early 2000, when the Hermitage received from the Russian state the General Staff building. This building, you can see it here in the foreground of the picture. It's actually a very interesting building. It consists of a series of beautiful courtyards connected by bridges, and also by 800 rooms of most different kind of scale and character. At the time, OMA was asked by Guggenheim Hermitage Foundation to kind of explore this building, to understand its potential, and to propose strategies for how it could be modernized and adapted to the needs of the Hermitage to exhibit art. as always, OMA started from a kind of bigger picture. So we looked at the Hermitage in comparison to other museums. And what we found particularly interesting was actually that the Hermitage was much bigger in terms of scale. It was like had the largest area. It had the biggest collection, and yet it had the smallest amount of visitors. And also because it was so remote from kind of the standard kind of Western, the center of Western culture, let's say, the Europe and the States, we thought that the amount of visitors would actually never really grow. So what we thought was particularly important and intriguing was to somehow see how this combination of big building, a very large collection, and a few people could be translated into a more subtle and a more contemporary approach to kind of exhibiting and dealing with art. So in the end, the project became a kind of exercise in numbers. What you see on the left-hand side are all the rooms of the kind of existing Hermitage. There are 1,200 rooms approximately, of very different size and different qualities. And what you see on the left-hand side below are the kind of rooms of the new General Staff building. All these rooms have, again, very different qualities, and what you see in red are the rooms that are under severe kind of preservation restrictions. So these are rooms that are very well decorated, very well preserved, and cannot be changed. On the other hand, the rooms that are in gray, they're rooms that are either kind of standard normal rooms or rooms that are in a state of neglect. We also tried to explore what were the virtues of the existing Hermitage. And of course, it was not about kind of conforming to international museum standards, because originally the Hermitage had no air conditioning, there was no filter for direct sunlight. You can see the window frame is peeling and so on. But nonetheless, the experience of art that Hermitage offered at that time was actually extremely unique and exceptional. It was very, very kind of intimate, and it was an important quality for us. Here you see perhaps one of the most famous paintings at the Hermitage, the Black Square by Kazimir Malevich, which is juxtaposed to a huge kind of yellowish sticker. It hangs against the light between the two windows that are also decorated with pretty awkward curtains. And it's lit by a kind of blinking and buzzing fluorescent light. Yet kind of the confrontation with art that was possible at that moment at the Hermitage could not be found elsewhere in any of the museums. And what we thought that was truly exceptional is that because the Hermitage was in a way too poor to modernize, because it was state funded also, in the end it basically was able to gain or somehow to preserve this kind of level of authenticities that other museums have lost through modernization. So the big question for us became, how can we intervene in this context without losing these very important conditions and these qualities? So this is the General Staff building when it was kind of found. The first site visit was actually done together with Thomas Krantz from the Guggenheim, and it was interesting that his observation about the 800 rooms were that they were all too small and none of them was able to accommodate large kind of American art, and he was proposing to introduce bigger spaces for exhibition of American art. On the contrary, OMA did basically exactly the opposite. The idea was that nothing should be changed, and what was introduced is a kind of regime of opening and closing different rooms at different moments. This regime enabled to think that, for example, the most ornate and the most decorated rooms could accommodate contemporary art. Instead, the spaces that were the most neglected and the most dilapidated were suitable for showing the most precious items. And we thought somehow that people would come to the museum anyway because they wanted to see these very important artworks, but they would see it against the backdrop of history that was not always like a kind of good history, but it could be a history of neglect or a negative history. Another very interesting idea that was proposed at the time was that The building has 800 rooms. If you give 8 rooms per year to different artists or intellectuals or even scientists or anyone who could have something to say about the current moment, after 100 years you would have an amazing repository, kind of museum of the century that reflects kind of all the current thinking in one single building. Another also interesting idea was that since there were so many rooms, basically floors between some of the rooms could be taken out, and this would enable to kind of to show simultaneously different historical eras in the same space. So basically what's important in the end for us about this project is that rather than doing kind of single architectural gesture, it was chosen, given the qualities of the building, to actually act more as curators or intellectuals and to investigate how this kind of, let's say this 800 rooms and their kind of environment could be enhanced and to create a more kind of interesting and more contemporary museum. OMA kind of obsession with the past somehow was, let's say, summarized in an exhibition that took place in 2010 at the Venice Biennale of Architecture. This exhibition addressed a very important topic. Basically, it was saying that as kind of the world is changing at ever-growing kind of scale, there is a parallel phenomenon taking place. And this phenomenon was that larger and larger portions of the planet were being somehow frozen or were being made immutable by different regimes of preservation. So I will present just a few arguments and you will see later why it's relevant. But basically, if in 200 years ago, it was important for the humanity to preserve monuments or buildings. Today, we're preserving entire cultural landscapes, but also we're preserving conservation camps, highways, factories, and so on. We're actually currently freezing about 12% of the total surface of the Earth. And of course, we know that preservation is directly connected and directly proportional to the modernization. So the more we can change through innovation, the more we worry about what should remain the same. But the only big exception to this preservation argument, and somehow it's shared by all countries, continents, and kind of politicians, is the fact that the architectural heritage produced between 60s and 80s somehow has no value and can be eliminated. This partially has to do with the fact that this architecture of the 60s was conceived kind of with a notion of architecture as a social project, which today within the market economy doesn't have any value anymore, doesn't make sense. This is, for example, the Palace of Republic in Berlin, which for this very same reason has been recently torn down. This phenomenon basically in the exhibition Venice was called the black hole of the preservation, so the period between 60s and 80s. And it is this very phenomenon that brings us somehow back here to Moscow, to the Gorky Park, where Garage has recently moved in 2012. It is now hosted in a temporary building designed by Japanese architect Shigeru Ban, while waiting to move to its permanent venue, in 1968, a restaurant originally called Vremena Goda, the seasons of the year. It was once indeed a very popular restaurant. It was designed as a kind of prototype for a standard Soviet cafe for 1,200 people. This is the condition in which the building was found in 2011. Also like this. What we found quite amazing was that even though the building was kind of abandoned and exposed to sun, wind, and rain and snow for more than 2 decades, it actually had, its structure was still really sound, really in good condition. It preserved a lot of original decoration, and most of all, and most importantly, it preserved kind of the generosity and the collective aura of like the post-war Soviet buildings. You can see here a beautiful monumental staircase. The building, sorry, too fast. The building also has a kind of a really good scale, and so people look good in it. And it's also good for, in our view, for exhibition of art. Additionally, the building has very beautiful views into the Gorky Park. So the main concept for our project was that in order to preserve all these qualities that we felt were very important, but at the same time provide a very comfortable space for exhibition of art, we would wrap the existing structure into a new facade that was made out of 2 layers of a translucent material called polycarbonate, which is also very light. The idea is that this new kind of very sophisticated skin would protect the kind of what we found from the weather, but would also filter kind of the views, creating almost like an abstract painting. Here you can see the winter version. So this is the overview of the building, kind of the project. The facade that we created will perform multiple functions. First of all, the polycarbonate will be lifted by 2.5 meters off the ground. This will enable to connect all the public related kind of programs at the ground level to the park. You can see it also here and here. The facade can be strategically lit to kind of announce to the exterior the activities that are taking place inside. It will also accommodate a large portion of kind of infrastructure that's required by the contemporary safety requirements, or norms, but that the original building didn't have. So this is, for example, the fire stair. And also, most importantly, in the cavity between the layers of polycarbonate, all the engineering infrastructure, or a large portion of it, that is needed for the building to have a proper museum climate. This infrastructure will run through the facade. It will follow the pace of the existing structure, and it will create a kind of abstract pattern from the outside. But given the visual kind of characteristics of the polycarbonate, it will only be seen from certain angles. So in order to highlight this idea of the facade as a kind of machine, we actually decided to strategically light certain kind of elements of infrastructure. Additionally, the facade will have special components that will highlight certain features of the interior. So for example, where we have a double height space in the lobby, for which garage plans may be to commission artworks, we want to create a large operable doors that could be lifted, as you can see here, and they can show towards the park the large kind of artworks that are being exhibited inside. So inside, as you can see, the original building consists of basically 2 levels of unobstructed open space that's located around 2 cores. I cannot point, unfortunately, but 2 cores for vertical circulation and infrastructure. The bigger core on one side has also an intermediate mezzanine level. Here you see the Curatorial Vision, which is structured primarily around 3 main blocks. First is the kind of exhibitions and project. The second is education, and the third one is research. And then a series of other kind of activities and programs that are generated by at intersection of these primary kind of blocks. So the idea is that in order to accommodate these programs within the existing building, we will kind of follow the spatial and the structural kind of possibilities of the existing building. Therefore, on the right-hand side, where we have a more fragmented spaces, research and educational activities will be accommodated. On the left-hand side, where we have bigger open spaces, exhibition spaces will be located. This is just, I was told I have 2 minutes, so I'll go quickly. Basically, these model shots basically show an incredible wealth and the variety of exhibition spaces that the existing building offers. They all have different scale, but also very different qualities. I will briefly show, this is for example the foyer, which can also be used for exhibitions. It's largely determined by pre-existing elements such as structure and kind of the ornaments, the Soviet ornament, the open storage. On the upper level we have one large exhibition space, but also smaller galleries. What was very interesting and important for OMA was to kind of investigate how art can be shown against the backdrop of the existing building. We think it would be really beautiful to have such strong context for showing art, but we also realized that not all artworks can be, Kate is laughing, that not all artworks can be shown with such strong context, so we developed a flexible system of operable panels that in our view would be normally stored under the ceiling and only lowered on specific occasions when a very neutral kind of backdrop is required. Here you see how the panels can be lowered. So we could, in a way with the system, create an instant white cube. Just to wrap up, I'll say very quickly that all the non-exhibition activities of the garage are condensed around one of the cores and they're connected into a single loop. So we have the restaurant, cafe, and bookshop. They also connect the ground floor and the mezzanine levels. So this is the bookshop on the steps leading to the mezzanine level, the cafe, while all the educational programs are compacted on the mezzanine level altogether in order to create more flexibility in terms of their use. And just, the final statement is that I hope that all this kind of wealth and richness of life that will take place inside the garage can spill out and contaminate the Gorky Park.